Needlepoint, the record collector podcast with Paul Lester and Daryl Easlea.
Hi, I'm Paul Lester, editor of Record Collector, Britain's oldest, longest enduring music monthly.
And my name is Daryl Easlea. I too work with Record Collector, and I'm the editor of the Rare Record Price Guide.
And this is our new podcast, Needlepoint, where we look at rock's rich tapestry, with apologies to Julie Birchall, through the prism of the latest issue of our magazine.
And what we're going to do is take it a little bit like a record. We're going to put the needle down on side one, which is going to be our cover feature, which this month is the top 200 most collectible records. And then we're going to flip it over and go through some other tracks and maybe even collector's bonus content.
It's quite a hefty old issue, it has to be said. I have to pick this up to feel the weight. It's 164 pages. I know that's a very technical in-magazine speak, but 164 pages is a lot. The industry standard these days is about 110, 115, 116. So you get a lot for your money here. And the cover story, as you've just mentioned, is all about let's be clear here. Is it about the rarest, most collectible records, or the most valuable? And are those three different things? And this is the UK we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the UK because we haven't done this sort of feature for a few years. Basically, I mean, I came back to the mag sort of full time, or with my arrangement in 2022, and it's been the first time since then we've done it. And I thought it was really important we just focus on this country and as an advert for the book. So, really interesting question: what's valuable, what's rare, and what's collectible can be three different things. We looked solely on this feature at price, because I think there's always that wow factor that a record can go for £10,000 or can even just go for £1,000 when you think, it was a single and it probably cost 50p in its day. I think rare doesn't necessarily mean expensive. My want list on various things is full of not very expensive records that are just impossible to find, but they're all like, 20 quid or something. And I think there is that thing. There are certain groups that are, as we know, exceptionally sought after. And when you look, the Beatles, of course, Pink Floyd, of course, Led Zeppelin and Queen are throughout. And the Pistols, Sex Pistols are hugely collectible, as we've discussed before on here, how that whole punk and post-punk area is one of the most sort of lucrative areas within. And
is that 10 years on from what it would have been, say, 10 or 20 years ago? Has it now moved? What would have been Beatles, Mersey Beat, mid-60s psych and all that kind of stuff? Are we now looking at the period 10 years after that being the most sought after?
I mean, you can't deny that Psych and Beatles, Stones less so, but still very strong, hold the big prices. But yeah, I think it's true. I think there is a sort of objectification of the artifact of some of that punk stuff. And certainly with the Pistols, obviously the A&M, God Save the Queen, will retain its value sort of in perpetuity because of the whole backstory that goes with it. And I think that's the whole thing, that you can still get £12,000 for the God Save the Queen with the letter. And, that I don't think will ever lose its value because of the story that's entwined with it.
Does that mean then that in our lifetime we're very unlikely to see the Pistols or the Quarrymen say that'll be the day, in spite of all the dangers, likely to see them usurped? Is it conceivable? I mean, without wishing to give the game away too much, that is an almighty sum of money that's being required to come up with for the Quarrymen, isn't it? Which is high in our list.
Well, it is, and the thing is, that's why there's sort of several lists and several cuts of this. This was a very route one. This is what people have paid, and this is what, if it was on the open market, you could expect to pay for it. Example, you're not going to get Paul McCartney's copy of That'll Be the Day. You're not going to turn into the record fair on Saturday or your local Oxfam and find it. But it's significant because it shows what you can achieve, if you like, what the rare Grail records can get. I mean, the fascinating one is always going to be the White Album, because that continues to sort of grow in value and desirability, partially thanks to the the vinyl revival TM. But you also get that that guy in America who's got a shop full of white album pressings, and that's it, and where people have drawn on their own sleeves and things like that. But that whole thing, I think, it's almost like the birth of the numbering system. That is to have that idea to put something that was like a limited edition print or book on a record. I don't know, and I'm sure our listenership can correct me. It's certainly one of the very first numbered records, and I think that whole starting that off, oh my god, I got a low number, is a phenomenal thing. So
you mentioned the chap. Sorry, Daryl, you mentioned the chap in America that's got only white albums that is part of his shop. Is it? We've alluded to this on the cover. Better than bricks and mortar. I mean, we're being ironic or dry or wry or whatever it is. We're trying to suggest that you could actually devote your life to buying and selling these artifacts and actually making decent wedge. Can you make a living out of buying and selling rare stroke, collectible stroke, valuable records?
Well, we have so many, friends, associates, and colleagues who are dealers, and you can make a living. I think this whole sort of myth of I bought this for 20p in a charity shop. It's the whole antique roadshow theory. Is it going to be the thing that's going to, I can be a millionaire about it?
Mm-hmm.
It's less so, but I think you can if you're shrewd and you've got the reputation. You can. It's certainly some of these collective prices. You could buy a terrace in Stoke-on-Trent with them without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, one of the nice touches actually in this feature, we've never done this before, even though we have done this kind of list before. We've never done this, which is to garner the opinions and the prices of a variety of collectors. It's not all done by one person, is it? This list. We've got Lawrence Kane Honeysett involved. He's largely the reggae expert.
Yep.
We've got Joe Geesin, who I always associate with things rock and prog. Joel McIver, who's quite metallic. Lois Wilson, who's very soul-y. And John Coleman, who's slightly more broad, I would venture. But nice to have the different voices and ideas and price differentials in their mind. All those people bringing their own value system to the table.
I thought that was really important because obviously this is our core, a good list with prices. Hey, we're Record Collector. We are so much more than that. But I thought if we're going to go back to source and do what we sort of made our name for, it would be great to get different voices in there. I mean, I've written a few in there as well, but I think that whole thing, editing it was, wiped out most of the early part of August to do it because I really wanted it to be as definitive as possible. I mean, all these things are just going to be a snapshot of a moment. But I think to get the different voices in and say, look, this is our Discogs team, that when you see a discography in the magazine, these are experienced people. They've been around the block and can do that. Not all the people, John is the main one that works for the RRPG with me. And there's a whole other wedge of dealers and collectors that I work with there, as well as those people. But they're all our writers as well. And I thought it was great to get, their turns of phrase and their eyes on it. So do have a look. It's beautifully designed. Val, our head of design, did a marvellous job on it. Pete did this fabulous cover, which certainly catches the eye.
Yeah, and it must be added that it draws on the powers of all things AI.
Well, it does, doesn't it, that cover?
I think the first use of AI on the front cover for Record Collector.
And
yes, actually, must ask the readers: do you who gets the pun on the opening spread? Was it the rare cuts?
Rare cut. You can see who.
Rare cut 200. Who are you alluding to there? You can tell I'd left the office and had gone on a 2-week cruise at that point.
Yes, that's right. The mice were at play, dear. Out we came. So, but that is only just a soup song of this fabulous edition, edited partially in your absence, but the hand on the tiller back from the cruise, bringing it all together so sweetly. We did function in your absence, 007, but we needed you to just, knock it home. What else?
Some great stuff. I mean, where do we start? We've got Gruff Reese, Super Furry Animals, in the RC interview hot seat, talking about what is now turning out to be a near 30-year career, astonishingly.
Amazing, isn't it? Really
We've
amazing.
got he's but a child compared to the next character under the forensic scrutiny of Max Bell, one of our writers who we've drafted in from the 60s and 70s, not the 60s, sorry, Max, 70s, 80s NME. He interviews, he interviews Peter Asher, the octogenarian Peter Asher, about the Peter and Gordon career, his work, his involvement with Paul McCartney, and the fact that he's still doing it. I think he oversaw the recent Barbra Streisand album.
Yeah, I mean, he is one of those phenomenal sort of hands behind the scenes, who has been in front of the scenes as well, obviously Peter and Gordon and stuff like that. But he, his phone book must be one of the best lists of contacts in the business, because he's worked with them all. He really has. And there's some great pictures in that feature as well, of him with like Stevie Nicks and Linda Ronstadt and all those various cats. But importantly, he and his sister Jane were very, very central in, educating Paul McCartney in the ways of the London scene and the avant-garde and the classical and all of those things. And, one wonders if Paul, and I did like a little Paul scratch there on my mouth for those people who are listening only. By the eye. And, one wonders if Paul would have ended up at the Indica Gallery had the Asher connection and not been there. So he's one of those.
It almost served a similar purpose to the Warhol coterie of arty avant-gardsters over in the States, which is hard to imagine, because you associate Jane Asher now with adverts on TV, and she's a very mainstream character. But in the mid-60s, she was a scenester, wasn't she?
Well, absolutely. I mean, they were what were they known as? The Carrots of Wimpole Street, because they were all. Apology to Gingerist, I have a ginger daughter. But I mean, that thing, they were right at the epicenter, of central London. He had that flat on top of their house, and he sort of had a bed sit up there, old Macca. And they were out and about, and he was having conversations at the dinner table about, classical music and the state of the world and Roland Barthes and things like that. And
could it be argued that he was the ninth Beatle?
I think he was a 39th Beatle, actually.
Okay, but as you say, I mean, he helped to push or gently coerce McCartney into various directions that it may not have occurred to him to go in those directions or follow those paths without the input of Peter Asher.
For sure. And I think, McCartney was like a sponge at that time. He was just taking in all his influences, and he'd grown up with the sort of the jazz band vaudeville influence of his father and Jim Mack's jazz band and all that. And he was taking all that in, and then he got all of that, and the path led to Revolver and Pepper, and I think that's helped with many other things, including a copious amount of illicit substances and homegrown talent, to take the Beatles out in a way that other groups didn't sort of go, and they had to follow in their wake. Obviously, I'm a big Beatles fan.
It's great that we had access to somebody. I said he's an octogenarian, but it's great to still have access to people who were there. I don't know how long we're going to be able to say that or do that. More and more, it's getting to be the case that the story is being retold by people who maybe were there, or they were associated with the person that was there. But very much with Peter Asher, you get a sense of this was a prime mover from the period, a really key figure at the centre of all things Sixers and countercultural.
Oh, definitely, and I think it soon it's going to be like the Second World War or the First World War, or the life of Beethoven. No one, fortunately, scrupulous records are kept now of most pop events and studio records. I think the days of like sloppy studio notes are very much over. So I think there will be enough for researchers and historians to draw on going forward. But those first-hand oral histories, are ebbing away. And only this week, I mean, 3 huge backroom people have gone. Names that maybe our listeners won't be accustomed to, but a guy called Dave Margerison, who managed Supertramp, who took Supertramp to that level of Crime of the Century and Breakfast in America.
And Rick Davis himself, didn't he, died this week?
Rick Davis, I mean, a week after, so it's amazing that that happened. And he also, for better or for worse, made Chris de Burgh a star, and he was marketing and he's doing all that. John Glover has passed away, who was ABC's manager, But prior to that, he worked for Island Records. You know, he worked with Free. He might have managed Free. Was Blackwell's right-hand man, things like that. And one of those geezers you'd speak to, and you know, he wore his past very lightly, and he'd say something like, I was in the room when All Right Now was written." He may or may not be, but things to that level. And also yesterday, Chris Hill, who probably Britain's first superstar DJ, the first DJ to have top 10 records with his cut-ups, Renter Santa and Disco Santa. Of course, we remember them fondly. Sorry, Bionic Santa. Disco Santa was the flop. But he also, you know, the Goldmine, Jazz Funk, the Funk Mafia, he was all that. But he also worked with Nigel Granger on Ensign Records. And one hand brought all the jazz and the funk and the soul in that he was playing.
Did he actually manage Light of the World, or did he discover them?
Certainly very closely involved at the start. He certainly signed them to Ensign, Black Slate, amazing Amigo record, Incognito were there. But also, you know, Boomtown Rats, Waterboys, World Party, and him and Nigel Granger, Sinead O'Connor. You know, so those backroom cats, Peter Asher is very much part of that. And all those guys are in their early 80s or late 70s. But it is like we almost feel like we're on a mission at the moment to capture their voices, you know, before.
Well, yes, I mean, you know, it's impossible to keep up with, you know, the number of people that we still need to write about to, as you say, document what their contributions. We should have done Chris Hill. We just about managed to get there in time to write about Dave Cousins, but it's a case that we turn up at the office on a daily basis and we think, oh God, who have we got to deal with the passing of this week?
No, I know, and I mean, you know, I was so upset to read about, you know, Cleo Lane, Sheila Jordan, one of the great overlooked jazz voices of the 60s and 70s. But the thing is, it's you know, it is every day, and one of those things which is coming up in our next issue, a brilliant archive interview with Terry Reid, another titan of the scene.
A lost interview, apparently, yet to appear in print, done in 2017, and a very illuminating read it is too. Great piece from Nick Hasted. It's a good issue actually next year. I don't know if we should talk about it now. We should come to it in a few minutes maybe.
Yeah, let's come to it.
Talk about people's appetites. And talking about people who were there, we haven't yet mentioned the panoply, the potpourri of people who are very much alive and prepared to talk to us. Spandau Ballet.
Yes.
The brothers Kemp, or at least I think we do speak to both brothers, Gary and Martin.
And Steve Norman's
in there. Steve Norman, yeah. It's a great piece. Sorry? Oh, Dagger, yeah, that's right. A key character. Yes, this documents or discusses their transition from Islington Electro Boys Wonder, their transition to, I guess, what were they after that? They became something slightly different. 1980, they were very much electronicists. And 81, they were White Funketeers, I guess on a par with ABC, Funkopolitan, Stimulant, Heck 100, and the rest, all our favourites. We should do over at Perry Haynes. We should do a whole issue devoted to 1981 next year, it being the 45th anniversary of that.
There could well be a calendar coming up.
Mirabilis. Yeah, indeed, the Christmas calendar. No, good read, good interview by David Stubbs with the Spans, and it's not a digression as such, but it's an interesting take on things where he talks about the difference, and he turns it into a column actually elsewhere in the magazine because we have monthly columns. He talks about the difference aesthetically and in every way really between the brothers Kemp and the brothers Gallagher. It's quite an interesting thing to scrutinise. The artistic quotient of one and the sort of the lumpen pro rock and roll of the other. No prizes for guessing which is which. But it's just an interesting way of divvying up the two brothers' contributions. I guess if you drafted in Ray and Dave from the 60s, you could do a 3-decade inspection of the decline and fall of the brothers in pop and the artistic contributions each made.
Ron and
Russell, yeah.
Top 3 UK hit makers this year.
Yeah.
And another an EP zone now, isn't it? God love them.
Got to number 2, didn't it? It didn't quite get to number 1, which is such a shame.
Yeah, but the streaming, you know, you're always going to get, when you're up against, what was it, Sabrina Carpenter or Chapel Roan or one of that lot. But there you are.
We were talking about Sparks earlier this week. Actually, you and I were discussing groundbreaking singles ahead of our Christmas cover.
Oh, yeah.
We may be taking a look at groundbreaking singles of the 70s, and we were because it was the year that Bohemian Rhapsody and 10cc I'm Not in Love came out, and we were trying to think of other ones that in that ballpark that was sonically and in terms of technology pushed the boundaries. And Sparks obviously came up in the conversation about that.
In fact, maybe our listeners could suggest some in the comments below.
That's a great idea.
For inclusion in there. Of course, we are Record Collector. This is the Needlepoint podcast, and you're listening on your favourite channel. Below are all our details, and please subscribe, give us a like. It's lovely to be here. I'm Daryl. Look, that's Paul, and he's going to tell us even more about the Record Collector you can buy.
Yeah, it's great stuff. So we've got Spandau Ballet over several pages with photos of them in their early pomp, looking very kind of very. What would Robert Elms describe them as? In very pretentious, highfalutin term, no doubt.
Oh.
But I love the pretentiousness of what they were about. They were just ludicrously, self-adoring and preening narcissists.
They were very, 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 very clean to be standing in the street to be taken by someone. Also, look at this. John Earls, Gentleman John Earls, the dapper dandy of pop music writing, has done a fabulous piece on, and we talked about collectibles and rarities, on 90s and noughties vinyl, mainly noughties vinyl, and 25 noughties albums not easy to locate on vinyl is in there, and it's a marvellous little gazetteer of the time when record companies thought, we'll just do CDs, vinyl's dead, who buys that? So, in some instances, 200, 300 copies were printed worldwide of records. And as a result, you've got things like Oasis's Familiar to Millions album, 550 quid. Lemon Jelly's first album, what a scene they were, £400. Blur's Best Of. Who would have thought Blur's Best Of is £350 now? And I mean, the thing with Blur's Best Of, I bought that for $2.99 in FOP when they were sort of clearing it out because no one wanted it on vinyl. And that's £350. So it's fascinating to show that it's not just your Quarrymen records. It's things you might have just bought and put in the rack because you stayed with vinyl. Have a look in there. It's a fabulous feature. It truly is.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about time only 25 years ago. Very recent history. And yet this stuff is now worth serious money. Talking about buying and selling stuff to keep the taxman at bay.
Balls at bay.
There's stuff here, stuff that you wouldn't expect either. Stuff you'd think would have been too ubiquitous to have acquired serious value. But Michael Jackson's Invincible, £125.
Yeah.
The Zootons, 90 quid.
Yeah.
Mojo, the French duo that had a hit with the Chic sampling record, £200.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was looking the other day at some things, and it's like, it is phenomenal because some of them aren't particularly good records. All the ones we mentioned are, but the demand was just not on record, and a lot of them have been repressed now, but they're still in that original format, exceptionally desirable. And speaking of exceptionally desirable, two more things I'd like to bring to your attention. The Chess Records feature, which is brilliant.
Yes.
About, Spandau Ballet, Chess. 200.
Where else? Where else? I ask you.
45 Berlin 45s as well. But the chess piece, I think, is very very good. Is very illuminating. I think Tony Burke.
Yes, Tony Burke. Yeah, it's a good piece, isn't it? And shines light on an important label.
Yeah, so it's a beautiful thing. And the other thing, Paul, what about that? Dear old, he just went, as we were going to press on the last issue, a fabulous retrospective appreciation of Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah.
Again,
we redid the issue before because Brian Wilson and Sly Stone had died. And I thought at the time, Ozzy as well. He was a huge response. I mean, it was real kind of wall-to-wall news coverage. Throughout that whole week. But do people really know about Ozzy? Isn't he just a cult concern? But no, he was much loved, really a national treasure when that phrase is much overused.
Yeah, but I mean, I think a lot of the people mourning him, if you asked them to name more than 5 records, they probably couldn't. But he that thing. And the thing was, it was too late in our site where Brian and Sly went sort of like 2 weeks in. He went like the day of,
Yes.
or the day before our wonderful David Gilmour issue. Let's not forget, beforehand, with the old devil on the front. So it was like, it was difficult. But yes, so look, Record Collector's great.
It
By
really,
Paul Lester there, one of the greatest men in the business. And tell us, Paul, you've been working on a new issue as well.
I have been working on a new issue, yes, and I'm going to remind myself of what's going to be coming out in the new issue due in the shops on the 2nd of October. On the cover, very interesting one. I don't know if you remember, way back in the mists of time, probably March 2025, we had on the front cover of Record Collector a certain John Lydon. And in fact, I think it was the first podcast that we did was around that particular issue.
Yes, I think
And
it
the
was.
point of that piece was we went to John Lydon's house in Los Angeles to rifle through John Lydon's record collection, which we kind of did, apart from the fact that a lot of the record collection was in London, several thousand miles away. But nevertheless, it was a great, really involving, really intimate encounter with an icon, term used advisedly, and his record collection, or his collection of stuff, anyway, memorabilia and the like.
Yeah.
But it did so well, we thought, well, who else can we do that with? Who else is big enough to support and at home with inspection of their collection? And it occurred, actually, there's this chap who's really quite voluble and loquacious. And we found out that there was this chap called Jarvis Cocker who was prepared to invite us into his home to talk about his record collection, which we do. We present on our next cover and on over many, many pages of the inside of the next issue. It's a very interesting piece, actually, very interesting. So Jarvis talking about himself, his life, and his records, 3 things that are dear to his heart. Plus, we have, as the aforementioned, Terry Reid over several pages, very interesting. Lost interview. We have an inspection of Ace Records on the 50th anniversary, sort of. We fudge it a little bit, but the 50th anniversary of its Genesis. Obviously, no Genesis records are sold in Ace Records. It was Rock On, wasn't it? It was born at that was its point zero.
Which could be found in Stamford, Lincolnshire.
Yes, Ted Carroll, the great Ted Carroll. The city scene, or the city whose 45s we take a look at, are Brighton's next issue. And we have a Q&A with Mandy Pryor and a 4-page interview with the Saints, Australian proto-punks.
Yes, very much.
Favourites of Bob Geldof, who may be appearing in a future issue. But the person I haven't mentioned, actually, which is ironic, because I mention in every podcast that we do, is a certain T. Rundgren. I know it seems like we do Todd Rundgren every issue. We don't. Actually, this is the first feature we've done with Todd since 2018. No fewer than, 7 years ago. So we had Todd Rundgren's coming to town. He's playing at Hammersmith Apollo, I want to say, in October. And so we've done an interview with him. Good interview, actually. Very good piece from a chap called Felix Rowe about all things AI. So the past, present, and future of Todd, really. Starting with the Runt, a bit about the Nas, but going through Runt, his debut solo album came out 55 years ago this year. Through the Ballad of Todd Rundgren, Something Anything, the double album. His decision to derail his own career with The Wizard of Truth, all that stuff, which was still fairly well covered path. But there's stuff that he does go into detail about stuff that doesn't normally get discussed in Todd Rundgren stories. Sorry, my blinds are going crazy in my you may have noted close inspection of this particular podcast will reveal that I'm in a different place to the usual with the Todd Rundgren vinyl backdrop. I'm in the conservatory because we thought it'd be a better place to have all my stuff arrayed before me. Anyway, Todd's in the next issue. So many pages, 8 or 9 pages with a discography. I think it's the first time I've seen a discography in Record Collector for Todd. Nothing going for serious money there. It's something to sort of discuss over a pint down the pub with your good self. Why would Todd Rundgren, who sold 250,000 albums in 1972-3 with Something Anything, gold record, not be worth money in 2025? But Nick Drake, who sold 2,000 records in 1973, be worth silly money 50 or so years on. What is it? What's going on here?
Well, less is more.
Right.
Guide, the story, the cult. Todd kept releasing stuff and releasing stuff and releasing stuff and then releasing stuff and doing it. Is this the Bossa Nova album? Is this the a cappella album? Is this thing? And it's always, I'd see it's like the Prince. I mean, obviously Prince is a completely different issue, but without an editor, the sheer wealth of material sometimes leads to it being less desirable. And also, Todd has never.
I've got one word for you though at that point. Sorry, one Beatles.
Yeah, but
Well,
I mean,
they're ubiquitous and popular and sold millions, and yet their stuff still goes for money.
yeah, but that's like comparing, I don't know, gold with a little bit of foil. I mean, it's like, I mean, don't get
What are
me
you
wrong.
calling foil?
I love Todd. I love Todd not as much as the next man, because the next man's you. And I mean, only Ted Cummings, esteemed PR for those who know.
Yeah.
You and him drink from Todd's golden slipper every day.
We were talking about Todd down at the local Greasy Spoon only
Of
on
course,
Wednesday.
but I think there's that thing he's never sort of caught on in the way. He's a cult. He's a big cult. He's a cult who actually had the hits. A lot of cults don't have hits. And I think the thing with Nick Drake is, he couldn't get arrested when he was alive. It's well known. No one really knew who he was. People who even played on the same bill as him never sort of met him.
Well, exactly. It would be Nick Drake would be something. It'd be like Skip Spence in 2025, putting out records, being on the cover of magazines and being worth thousands and thousands. Of course, that never happened. But why not Skip Spence?
Well, because the way that Nick Drake's career has been curated since the 80s, Joe Boyd famously never took him off catalogue. He said whenever he sold On Which Season to Ireland, he said you could never delete these records. And it was only 3 albums in. And then the Fruit Tree box came with Time and No Reply of the outtakes and the unreleased stuff. And then a cult grows. Nick Drake looks beautiful.
Yeah.
Artist. I mean, ironically, as Todd did an album called The Amazing
The ever popular Tortured Artist Effect, 1983. Very good.
Yeah, but that's it. Nick is frozen in time.
Yeah.
That moment, and and what's fascinating, and I must say, and a real hats off. And when we're looking at the year-end reviews, which are coming soon, that box set, The Making of Five Leaves Left. When people thought it's all over, how can there be any more? This
Nothing
tape
else.
that was found, and to hear him talk, is just quite amazing. So there is still sort of ink in the well.
I love the when we actually had Nick Drake on the cover, didn't we, about 2 years ago with Syd Barrett, and we were looking at the similarities of their different trajectories, but they were crossover things that happened. Well, the thing I liked within that was Rob Chapman, the writer of the piece, who actually wrote a book about Barrett and Drake, I believe.
Yeah. Fiction, yeah.
He talked about doing hitchhiking in 1972-3 and getting picked up by Nick Drake the day that I got a lift from Nick Drake. It's fascinating because you just don't think of these as real people.
Yeah.
If you were to do a biopic, you just wouldn't believe the character wouldn't have sufficient authenticity because it wouldn't be Nick Drake. It has to be Nick Drake.
I know.
Because he's the most Nick Drake person on the planet. It would have to be him. But interesting. We did attempt to do an AI cover, didn't we, with Nick and Sid? We tried to imagine an AI fictional version of a meeting that may have happened between Sid and Nick in 1974. AI wasn't quite up to the task of doing that then. But it'd be interesting to return to that now to see if it could be done more believably.
Well, I hope it's done more believably than that. You see that meme of Ozzy Osbourne going up to heaven and being greeted by Freddie Mercury and John Lennon.
Right.
Bob Marley sort of hands him a spliff, and
I think there have been other ones. I think that was maybe the latest iteration. There were other ones doing the rounds last year, but
we shall see. I mean, it's a very fascinating time to be alive, and certainly to be doing what we do, putting together words and pictures to tell a story. Because you can. Is it a challenge? Is it a threat? Or is it like computers are going to come in and no one's ever going to hold a pen again, or Kindle's coming in, no one's ever going to buy a book? It's like how we use it, and we can control it, or will it control us?
Well, I mean, I can't quite tell yet. Is it just Wikipedia with knobs on, or could they do serious damage to the idea of the music journalist? And then, images is a whole different other conversation. But
isn't it just?
When you're trying to put together a 12-page article on Nick Drake, Syd Barrett, or whoever in 2025, it would certainly help to be able to
make up.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, is that what you want to do? Do you want to have, because this stuff isn't documented, because people like Nick Drake, as we've just been saying, didn't get written about in 72, 73. No one knew who they were. So
No.
there isn't a trove of stuff. There's actually more stuff in terms of recordings than there are documentation of the people talking to magazines, which you would thought would be more common.
Well, you would want, I remember interviewing Genesis about, because there was a bill, very famous bill, where Nick Drake supported Genesis.
Yeah.
And I said to Mike Rutherford, and I said to dear Richard McPhail, who's left us, who was their road manager, said, we sort of saw him and he left. We saw him putting his guitar into his case and walking out after he played, and that was it. So this thing of, they're all hanging round, and Peter Gabriel was taking notes about, the pastoral English idyll or something. But soon there will be a picture of them both doing it, because it will be created backstage at Farks in Southall.
It's like the Sid appearing at the Wish You Were Here sessions. I mean, the number of times they've been asked about that, the feeling is that eventually someone's going to ask that question and get extra stuff that hasn't been mentioned to date. Because there isn't going to be extra stuff, because it was probably a 5-minute cameo appearance.
Well, I mean,
uncomfortable cameo appearance.
There's that Polaroid. I mean, there's and he's supposed to be sort of enormously fat, and actually, I mean, he's bigger than he was, but I think enormously fat in 1975 is not enormously fat in 2025.
Yeah.
I think he didn't look like a beanpole wearing some LA Dodgers t-shirt. Now, that's all very well. LA Dodgers, journalists, AI. Paul, what have you been doing since we last spoke?
Well, that's a good question. I've been away on holiday. I went, I sort of hesitate to say a cruise around the Med, because it puts me in a price bracket that just isn't the case. I sound embarrassed here about going on a Mediterranean cruise, but actually it's probably cheaper than your average all-inclusive Mallorcan sojourn.
Yeah.
But anyway,
right.
So I've been on a cruise. The musical quotient was considerable, actually. There was a really good Cher tribute act on the boat.
Yeah.
That was really enjoyable. Then on another night, the same Cher tribute act lady did a night devoted to divas in pop.
Right, including lots of Cher.
It wasn't all Cher, actually, and there was I don't know if it was Luther. There were some chaps as well that she did. She broadened the scope of what was, the meaning of the word diva.
Did she impersonate, or did she just sing their numbers?
She is a little halfway between the two, but
right.
She was strong of voice and amusing of character. She was very good. And there was a chap on the boat that he was a tribute to soul artists, past and present. Yeah, pretty good. And that pretty much was my musical quotient for the for the last few weeks. I'm trying to remember if anything else. No.
Well, there we go. Well, I too have been on holiday, and again, I don't wish to sound in the same bracket as you, but we went interrailing through Europe, and actually, I've never done it. My mates did it, and it was a bit like, wow, this is actually lovely. And I went to. We've been at some friends do in France, and we got the train over to Montreux, which I've never been to. We all went down to Montreux on the Lake Geneva shoreline, which indeed I was. And it's amazing how ingrained music is into that lovely town. And I went to see where there's a Freddie tour, and I'm not a huge Queen fan, but the fact that you go into Mountain Studios and all that, because that was the path that all the other artists that recorded at Mountain Studios did. And it's fascinating, because I've always had this sort of thing, Bowie, especially at Mountain Studios, recording sort of Lodger through to bits of Buddha Suburbia. I think even something after that he did. That was part of Earthling was recorded there, and that was the last thing he did. But I've always sort of thought of Mountain Studios as being like in a mountain, it's like all these things. It's like going to where ABC recorded Let's Have Love at Sarm East, which is like, a basement below a cab firm in Brick Lane. You think, it's going to be a studio with a big grand piano in the middle of it. Well, the thing with Mountain Studios, it's in a casino. It's in the casino building that burnt down in Montreux, as sung about with some stupid with a flare gun in Smoke on the Water. So it's not there anymore. The studio's gone, but you sort of walk into a casino on the lake in the middle of the town. And it's a bit like, I don't know, a recording studio being in the old Trocadero in Piccadilly Circus. It's slightly more romantic setting. And they do a little replica of the studio in there, and you can have a little Freddie museum. But at the side, they've got the side door is exactly as it was, and they've got a Freddie wall where everyone graffitis on it. And I had my picture taken by the door. And then you're given a pen by the guide. It was brilliant. You're given a felt pen to graffiti your own Freddie.
Oh, very good.
So I did the M logo because pop music was recorded there.
Right.
And I also listened to this Dexys 1984 because they recorded one track for Don't Stand Me Down there. And then I wrote I Love John Deacon because obviously he was the coolest member of Queen. My little minor act of subversion, but it was tremendously exciting just to see it and just to think you could actually feel, you know, obviously there's a big statue of him in the harbour, but you can feel Freddie's presence. You know, it's such a sort of Freddie town, and his apartment he had there towards the end and everything. A really good tour. So if you're there, it's well worth seeing. There's a man from Wolverhampton on the tour as well who was wearing a Freddie Hot Space T-shirt which he'd made himself, which I was very thrilled to see. And I just said at the end, when I realised from Wolverhampton we were jesting away, I said, "Oh, who's that on your T-shirt supposed to be?" We laughed.
Actually, talking of you just mentioned there was one of my other musical endeavours over the last few weeks was I read the Kevin Rowland book, and I read it in a couple of days because it was quite riveting. I know in your review you said effectively this is in word what the Searching for the Rebels album it was in music.
Yeah,
I sort of agree. I mean, it's stunning, it's startling, but it's actually written in that kind of fairly quotidian, neutral tone of many biographies, which was just to tell the story. That what makes it stand out is the shocking nature of the revelations, rather than the style and the tone, really. But it was gripping stuff, and yeah, I mean, it made you realise, well, is there any more for this character to reveal, Kevin? I mean, it was really quite...
it was it's a bit like, could you actually reveal less, Kevin? Could you keep
too much information occurred.
You know, as I said in our review in the mag, it is like being handed the supporting notes to the albums, because almost like, you know, Dexys themselves, I've certainly mentioned, probably not as much as people reading it would want to have, the Dexys fans.
Well, there was. I would have liked more of that, really, a detailed forensic analysis of, you know, this is what she's like, and Till I Believe in My Soul, you know, and on the train from New Street to Euston out to Harrow again. I'd like to have more of that kind of stuff.
You actually sort of read about him on the train from New Street to Euston earlier in the book, and you read about the, you know, stolen wristwatches and big studded rings, tall talk of girls and all that kind of thing from Show Me when he's hanging out with his lads and being bullied at school. You know, that brilliant bit where he goes to Harrow and he's got his Wolverhampton accent. It's something like, you're like, oh, I'm giving Rowland and all got this or something, and everyone just for the next 2 years just stopped him in the playground, kept going, hello, Rowland.
The other one of the omissions, it's only a tiny detail, but, you know, because we love Record Collector, we love detail in stuff. I was amazed at the omission of any mention of My Life in England, the single that came out in 2003, I think it was, just out of nowhere for me. I don't know what the provenance of that record. It was My Life in England, and there was a track on the B side or the extra track. Yeah, Manhood.
It's just manhood. It's just
which I quite like, but I thought My Life in England was one of the best things they ever did, and I can't believe there wasn't an A or a national holiday or a B, a kind of a police inquiry, or something major that it looked into the greatness of where this record came from and why it didn't do any better in the charts, because it kind of flopped completely. But what a great record!
Yeah, no, it's a bit.
It talks about going to being from Wolverhampton and coming to London and the Duke and having his accent mocked and all that kind of thing. It was a really kind of poignant piece of music, but with a really toe-tapping beat and a great melody.
But I think what's interesting is Dexys aren't mentioned till about page 130. I mean, they're mentioned in the intro, but you know, it really is. It's a sort of forensic exploration of his youth and his rejection by his father and his, you know, all of these things.
Yes.
And right to the end when he about his father's funeral and everything, it's like, wow, that's
He
a
does
lot.
seem to. He does seem to care unduly about at the age of 70 what his parents thought of him in
Yeah, but I
1958.
suppose I don't know.
Maybe
That's
that's
I don't think you'd have had that music had you know he
had he
been
not. Yeah.
ultra successful and loved at home. But he sort of is. I mean, it's read it.
Well, that's the other thing that I actually, because you keep reminding me of things that happened over the last few weeks. Talking about parental involvement and the impact of parents on music. My 8-year-old daughter Shoshana discovered Michael Jackson about 2 months ago. Just I don't know how it happened. So now all we get all day long is Thriller, and she loves Thriller. And she actually likes a track called Chicago, from one of the unreleased tracks that appeared in one of his posthumous records. But anyway, she made us go and see MJ the musical, and of course
Oh yeah,
that's got many scenes delineating the impact of Father Joe on the boys, particularly Michael, and the somewhat vicious nature of the relationship. So, I mean, you're right. Brian Wilson without Murray, considerably
Father,
different
oh,
character, arguably. Yeah.
Madonna.
Yes,
You know,
he's one. By the end, you're thinking, yeah, he's almost one of those. Not quite as cruel as a Joe or a Murray, Mr. Rowland, but he certainly figures large, doesn't he, in his son's
oh yeah,
career and his mind.
it's a very very interesting book, and I say the review is in the new record collector there, and worthy of its 5 stars, not having one knocked off between
I do tend
delivery
to.
and print.
Sorry about that.
Now, I'll tell you what, we have to go very soon, but it's been an honour, and I want to show you one thing here. That's the one record I bought on holiday, Have a Cigar by Rosebud, backed with Money, which is from the Disco Pink Floyd album, which I've already got on LP, but I haven't got on 7-inch, so I'll be spinning that out. And of course, both from, no, that's obviously from Dark Side, but Have a Cigar is from Wish You Were Here, which is getting the souped up treatment coming up, and I'll be writing about in a forthcoming issue. That was bought from a marvellous record shop in Turin. Oh dear boy. And my last thing, Paul, darling,
Yes.
what are you listening to? What's your favourite cut at the moment?
My favourite cut would be probably, I'm still loving Charli XCX. Yeah, the single I still can't stop playing is Charli XCX, Everything is Romantic.
Yeah.
It's an absolutely brilliant piece of work. Previous great piece of work that she did was a Todd Rundgren sampling track that came out as a single about 5 years ago. But no, this is an amazing piece of music.
Well, I was listening to Cameron Winter. Are you familiar with
Cameron Winter, yeah, my son pointed it out to me. I thought, oh, yeah, it's pretty good. Actually, it's really great. Johnny Johnston on Facebook, one of our writers, declared it one of the greatest albums ever
Well,
made.
that's because the great thing when you're on holiday for me is having time, the time I don't have normally, and I had my headphones with me, so I thought, oh, I'll give it a spin because he said it, and then someone else said it of equal weight,
Yeah.
and it is because the first track, the Rolling Stones, just it does sound like he's like a parody of Tom Waits meeting Ozzy Bear, meeting someone else, and you just think, oh, is this for real? And then you get into it, and there's a song called with a charming title, "Cancer of the Skull," but that's really really good. And I heard a group called Pincher, Pynchr, and very very interesting, like 4-piece young band from I'm not sure where, in British. We got a really nice cut of their jib.
Well, I think actually, you reminded me that we did do it once with Lemon Twigs. When a band comes through that's very much of the, if you like them, you're like this ilk. We should do them, and we shouldn't hesitate to do them. We should do them a bit quicker. And Cameron Winter is one of those. We should do a new artist piece on him because he would make sense to our readers. Yeah, he's brand new, but he's in a tradition, or he references stuff that our readers would like.
And there's a brilliant Pincher, there's a track called Space Rocket Simulator that I really quite enjoy, and also TV for Cats as well. I've been on a real little sort of odyssey, and I've got a lovely friend called Chanel, and we send each other little things we're listening to. And she sent Cameron Winter about 4 months ago, and I'd sent it to her while I was away. She said, "Yeah, I've sent you this already." So it's
Well,
like,
just as I was coming on to do this with you today, my other son pointed out that he sent me a link to a Spotify to an act called New York. That's a great name, and they look really good as well. To these two cool young one boy, one girl. They look great. And yeah, it was kind of electronicized but melodic. You know, the combination I love. You know, with sort of clean, crisp electronics meets.
TV for Cats does that, so you'll love that.
You know, the exquisite melody, great combination. What else is there?
We digress, as always. It's been such a pleasure. This is about the 8th needlepoint, isn't it now? It was only a dream at the start of the year.
They said it would never happen, and it has.
Me and the boy from Watford.
Hemel. Well, King's Langley, I prefer. Yeah, it makes it sound better. Yeah, I like this new configuration with a different backdrop. Obviously, it hasn't got the pop quotient of the previous one, but everything's on a level and everything looks kosher.
It's very good.
My parts.
It's a beautiful scene. So listen, we'll be back next month. Soon we'll be having guests on here. We've been finding our feet, and they're down there, and we will have guests. We'll have regulars from the mag on, and we'll have superstars on.
And incredibly, you know, because we're talking about having just come back from summer holidays. We're about to embark on our Christmas issue.
Tell me about it.
How does that happen? You know, it needs pointing out many times to people. We work 3 months up front, so we're always living in the future, aren't we, in a record collector? So yeah, it's September, but we're thinking about not just Christmas. We're thinking about what should we put on the New Year's cover, January, February, that kind of time. You know, so we have to predict what's going to be of interest to our readers way in the future. Yeah, it's not easy being us.
The lovely scene. Anyway, this is a lovely scene. So I've been Daryl Easlea.
I've been Paul Lester. And thanks very much for listening to Needlepoint. Stay tuned. In about 4 weeks, we'll be back.
I look forward to seeing you immensely. Bye-bye.
Needlepoint, the record collector podcast with Paul Lester and Daryl Easlea.